Thanks everyone for being here. This is our August community meeting. The agenda is usually the same. We start with introductions. This is us. We've been adding a few external contributors to the list here. So welcome everyone. So usually we do some short intros. I guess everyone knows me here, and what I've seen. Everyone in the call has been here in the past, but I don't know if you all know each other. I know all of you, the people are not from Okta. So maybe if you want to just do a quick intro, like Andrew, Dan, Gurleen, and Jeremy, it will be pretty cool. So you get to know each other at least.
Cool. I'm Andrew Powers. I am a software engineering manager at Read AI, and I think we've been using OpenFGA in production since 2023. Yeah, and really liking it. We're going to make some updates to our model soon, so ramping back up on context there. Thanks.
Very cool. So I'm Dan, distinguished engineer at Grafana Labs. We are using OpenFGA quite heavily for the next gen authorization system within Grafana, and I've been particularly interested in some of the back-end work. Yeah.
Cool.
I am Jeremy. I am an engineer at Headspace, and we are really close to using OpenFGA in production. The target's next week. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of work. I'll probably reach out to you, Andres, to talk about some of the challenges that we faced and how we overcame them and what our setup is. So I'll get some stuff vetted on our ends and then reach out to you, and maybe we can talk about that next month.
Perfect. That's awesome. I'm super happy to hear that. So congrats. Gurleen, do you want to introduce yourself, or if you can?
Yeah, Gurleen, I'm senior engineer at Docker, and we have been using OpenFGA for almost 1.5 years in production. And one fun thing that we're working on is custom roles using OpenFGA. That's coming along really nice.
Cool. Hope to see the custom roles in my Docker organization soon.
Yeah,
so
in a couple of weeks you'll see it.
Awesome. Okay, great. So we've been, as you may know, we've been working almost for a year in improving performance across the board. We've been working first on check. Those check improvements were under experimental flag for a while, and now we are confident enough that they are all enabled by default in the core product. And so that had been happening after, I think, 1.9 that we, or maybe not, we just did that. We enabled them by default for everyone. And now we started working a couple of months ago on ListObjects. We have experimental flag for that. We're gonna see details, so I won't spoil the results. So we're gonna be presenting what we're doing and the results we got. We still not enabled by default. We haven't enabled. I won't spoil anything. I want to keep talking about what we do in this object, but I'll let the team do that. And then we fixed a small issue with secondary and primary replicas enabled when you have metrics for both. That it wasn't starting, and that was fixed. So thank you very much for whoever fixed it. We had a small feature in the CLI, which is you can now specify wildcards. If you have more than one test file, you can run them from a single CLI call, which is useful for a few use cases and also for us. And small fixes in Java SDK. We're working on a few more fixes there too, and we'll ship soon. Support for latest versions of IntelliJ. And then there's a new kind of standard to specify the security posture of your repositories. There is a file called Security Insights. They have a new schema or version of the schema, and we deploy that in all of our repos. They give us some security and CNCF points in all the scanning things they have. and gives you more metadata and information how we're handling security across all the repositories. And actually also enabling, there's the CNCF, the Opens, I think it's the OSSF, they have a tool called scorecard.dev that you can point it to one of your repo and give you a rating. We have been enabled for OpenFGA for a while, give us a pretty good rating there. And we're enabling it for all of the repos now. And then so that we're going to add the widgets in the README for all of them pretty soon. And also the numbers are pretty good there in general too. Okay, so list objects improvements. I'll invite Victoria and Z to present this. They're going to use their own deck, so I'm going to stop sharing, and they can share.
Oh, thanks, Andre. Yes, for the intro. Performance improvements on list objects, or how we 5x the speed of one of our core APIs. And so this slide was for the broader audience, and I would explain what is FGA. So, fine-grained authorization or relationship based access control, right? So what we're doing is basically answering authorization questions like, can a user perform an action on a resource? Like, can Bob view a document? And so our main API is check, right? So for check, we're just doing, is user related to a resource as a relation? Like, is user Bob related to document as can read? And we're doing those check relations. And so list objects is basically just a ton of those check relations. And so list object, what list object does is basically list all the documents that a user Bob can read, or that user has that can read relation to any document, right? And so if we're taking like a Google Drive authorization model where we have documents and documents can have this can read, and we have folders and we have groups, and then we have users. User can be a part of a group. Then now group can be related to a folder. Group can be related to a document. User can be related to a folder and a document. Folder can be a parent of a folder, right? So this gets messy pretty fast. The possibilities are endless even with the small model. And so list object is a graph traversal problem, which becomes slow pretty fast as soon as the model grows, as soon as the number of documents grow. So this is a visualization of the Google Drive model. And so there seems to be fairly straightforward, just a few relations, just a few ways to reach the document from a user. But if you see some other customer models, they're huge, and possibilities to get from one point to another are endless, and sometimes that used to result in lots of database queries just to get each and every relation. So what happens then? So our customers would have some pain point like latency. So waiting on list objects typically means somebody seeing a spinner in the UI. Possibly limited results. Because it's slow, because it's a graph problem, we have to limit ourselves not to query the whole database in memory, and we're limiting to 1,000 results right now. Low RPS, so we cannot sell a lot of RPS, knowing that this potentially can create an unlimited number of queries. And sometimes, obviously, it returns timeouts. So for some customers, these limitations are a deal breaker, and they won't even use it. And so what we did, the performance optimizations that we did, created like up to 5x latency improvements, 6 or 7x database query reduction. And we've seen that in the community that for some users, this went down from 3 seconds to less than 100 milliseconds. So great result. Now what we did, like how we achieved it. So first things first, we enable local cache on the list objects check iterator, or which basically allowed caching database queries and caching some of the check results. And so that resulted in reduced average latencies, but also P99s. If we see those spikes that we had, those reduced a lot, and also number of queries where we had spikes of tens of 20,000 database queries now reduced to reasonable numbers. So that was first. So another thing is the bigger change is new graph traversal and query algorithm. So originally, we would just expand the graph and use breadth first graph traversal. And so, we would go to the next node or from the top, right? we would query the next level, right? And then traverse, then basically repeat the whole thing again and again, right? Until we reach all the possible paths from the user to get access to all the documents, right? And this would take, not only this was a serial call, but this would also have more potentially data was stored queries than needed. It would traverse all the paths, even though some paths were never able to reach the document in the authorization model, right? So in the new algorithm, what we're doing is we're using the weighted graph. In the weighted graph, we know pre-calculated ways of how a user can reach the document or that relation. And so we're only following those paths. And also we're reducing the number of traversals that we're doing. And that a lot of that can be called in parallel instead of serial. Yeah, and other optimizations I'm gonna pass to Victoria too.
Yeah, so when it comes to intersections and exclusions, we also added some optimizations to the graph traversal. So prior to this change, once we hit an intersection path, we would kind of offload the querying to check, which would basically retraverse the entire graph. Whereas now we can distribute the queries so they're done in parallel at the intersection level, and we only traverse from that point of the graph down. So you can see that the P99 went from 900 milliseconds to 700, so about 30% improvement. Next slide, please. And I guess I should also speak to, sorry, could you go back? One other thing we did with intersections and exclusions is because we're using the weighted graph now, when we choose a path to traverse, we choose the one with the lowest weight first when we're doing intersections, so that we can get all of the valid objects first, which we can then check against the other intersection paths. So we don't need to check what are all the potential objects that could be true for the most nested paths. We can just check what are the potential objects that could be true for the shortest path. And then once we know that, we can validate it on the other paths. Next slide. So for this improvement, obviously accuracy is our #1 priority. Overall, our priorities are accuracy, resiliency, and performance. But to ensure accuracy, we took some steps. So next slide. So of course we have unit tests and system level tests, but I just want to speak to shadow mode here. Next slide. So we added shadow mode, which basically allows us to continue using the old ListObjects algorithm, return that result to our users first, and then calculate whether the experimental optimization is also able to have the correct response and return that as well. Then we can have statistics or query this on Datadog and hold on to those metrics to see over time whether or not we're meeting our accuracy. So these are just some upcoming areas that we want to address. So we still need to add optimization for models with recursion, requests with user sets, and models with more targeted complexity. I also want to call out that although users have definitely seen improvements and we have measured improvements, there are some edge cases that we're looking into where there might be small issues that we're still addressing. So it is still an experimental. Next slide. Oh yeah, so this was a team effort. So thank you to Justin, Adrian, Yazel, Joshua, the whole team. Next slide. So yeah, any questions? I know we had a question in the chat about the tool we use to draw the model. That's actually a tool that Will wrote that we use internally. There is, I think we have an interest in making it public. So if people want to see that and want to be able to use that, then we can probably get the ball rolling on that.
Does
All
someone
right.
want to explain what is the weighted graph?
Justin?
I don't know, Justin, Joshua, I don't know. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah, we can. Absolutely. So the weighted graph is just a basic weighted graph data structure that you'd see in other types of graph theory. The weights are based upon the complexity of the traversal to the next node. So this is determined by the type of connection and relationship. So if it's an intersection, exclusion, a union, those all will affect the weight of the graph. And if we can't determine the actual weight because there is the potential for tuples to create recursion, so like a self-referential type of relationship or a TTU with a parent to another node that leads back to the node, and depending upon how the tuples are written, it could imply a lot of recursion. So with that, we just label that as like an infinite weight essentially, because we can't really determine it. And so that helps us to make better decisions about which paths we should traverse first. So something that's a lower weight would be easier to resolve and be able to get answers much faster. So this is particularly useful in check requests when you have the potential to find an answer, a terminal answer, before traversing all of the really heavyweight paths that might also have the answer. So really useful there, but also useful in finding things for list objects as well.
Yeah, more specifically, like an example that I can give where we actually use a lot of weighted graph for the list objects that when for intersection exclusion, what we need to do is we need to select a smart path to do get the potential list object so that we can run check against it. So if let's say that there's one path that is extremely simple and one path that's more complex, we choose the simple path to get the potential candidate so that because those will allow us to get the result much quicker, and then we run check against the more complex path so that we have less thing to compare against. So that's one of the way we actually use weighted graph. Of course, there are other things that we use. For example, we use the weighted graph to trim off path that we know that will never produce result. For example, if let's say that there's never a connection between a potential object and a candidate object, we can think of it that way, right? If there's no path exists, then we should not even go down that path to do query on, because they will never yield any results. So these are some of the way we actually use the weighted graph to give us performance improvement for the list object.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, in general, all the new performance improvements we are doing on top of that weighted graph, and we have some ideas of how we can improve that weighted graph with information that will help us in the future to actually do more optimizations in the algorithm. So, yeah. So this tool is something we'll probably open source at the moment because we have it internally, but I don't see a reason why it cannot be out there.
So just a little bit update there. The graph tool, there is a graph tool that is available in our OpenFGA language repo. So, and then the weighted graph itself is also there. So like
perfect. But the tool that creates the picture, that is not there, right? If you want to visualize the graph.
There is already a tool to allow picture the old one that we have in the language.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make it part of the CLI at some moment. Makes sense. Okay, good. Perfect. So that was it. Now I'm gonna have some fun myself. So let me just share my screen. And so you might have seen this in some channels, but I've been playing with, as everyone else, we're trying to use AI, MCPs, and things like that to help you do whatever you want to do. So we built a very simple MCP that just provides some information how to write a model for OpenFGA. That you can see it here. That I can share the link to the repo that has it and documentation. And here are a couple of other MCPs that are not very relevant for this one, but I want to show you how you can use this to play with OpenFGA so if you want someone to learn about it, right? Someone in your company, you want to understand, explaining how to use it they want to create a sample model to learn it, you can use it, but you can also be used for the models you have, right? For some flows that might be interesting for you. So I'm going to start with a very simple thing. I'm going to say create and authorization and I'll just be explicit. Authorization model for let's say for Grafana using the MCP, the OpenFGA. In most cases, he should pick it up, but just to be sure, it does pick it this time. Let's make it explicit. Right? So this is not going to look at the Grafana repo and pick the existing OpenFGA model. It's just going to make something up based on what it knows about Grafana, right? I guess it will create something about dashboards and monitoring and things like that. You can put there instead of Grafana, you can say okay, down left, so he won't be able to see the demo for the Grafana repo. But you can be things like you can put a URL of a website, a product, an industry. So for insurance or for a specific thing you want to do. So you can be very vague or very concrete about the transition model you will create. So here it's working on it. It's creating organization, team, data source, folder, dashboard, alert rule, and certain relationships, and that made sense for the LLM of how to handle this. Then it's going to also create a FGA YAML file that also is going to provide some tuples and tests for that model. And so it's pointing out to the model. It's generating some tuples, and it's generating tests for the different users that generated this, and for the different permissions and different roles it has. And now it's going to run the tests. In this case, it was the first time it ran it, and some of them failed, right? And so it fixed them. And the second time it ran it, they all succeeded. Okay, So this idea of I can author the model and the YAML and then run the test and iterate is pretty powerful, right? So you can actually get this going and it will generate something that works, right? Okay, this is not very useful if you're already using OpenFGA because you already have a model, right? So what else can you do here? So you can say, for example, let's please split the model in modules. If you see here, there's certain things that maybe are owned by different teams, like organization and team can be a core module, and then the rest of things on dashboard can be for managed by a different team. So you can get FGA to help you do all those changes. If you want to be more explicit, you can say, okay, move these specific types to a module, right? And it will just do that. And again, very broad to what the things I'm sharing, I'm telling you to do. So in this case, it created a core module and a teams module and a module for dashboards and folders, which makes sense, right? And then a monitoring one for alerts. So now it's going to use the same test file, which makes sense, right? Because the tests are the same, the model didn't change, and now it's going to make it point to the FGA.mod. And again, the tests now it's creating a separate test file for the modular version. I don't know why, because we don't need it. Let's do it anyway, and creating an updated README. Okay, good. So it created another test file and it worked. If you have any idea of something you want to ask the agent to do, let me know. We can try it live. I have some ideas, but I'm sure there are more. Something I'm going to ask it now when it finishes is to add temporal access for admins. So we can allow someone to be an admin for an hour or something like that for a specific period of time. Okay, perfect. It's very detailed about what it did as usual. Thank you, AI. Okay, now an add temporal access for organization admins. Okay, so it added the condition, added the new conditional tuple there, and then it will add some examples to things. Now, yeah, the Gurleen told me they were adding custom roles in for Docker. So let's try to also add custom roles here. Let's wait until this finish. Just the idea of helping it adding tests to the features you add, that is super helpful because it helps you kind of writing tests is usually time consuming, right? And having this be auto-generated helps a lot. You can try any model you have today and ask them to generate tests, right? They will pass. And you can use them as regression tests for the next iteration of the model, right? If they don't break, it seems that the behavior is the same. So that is a very easy way to get some value quickly of something like this. yeah, these AI demos are easier when you watch a video and you can speed up all the time that AI is doing things. I find myself trying to make up something to say while this thing is going.
As always double check what the AI is doing. So don't trust this and put this into your production as is. This is a great
of course.
to start iterating and doing all this work.
So we always have an AI skeptic in the group, you know, and in our case, so I will just put this in production without even checking it because I'll trust AI fully. But I always have my little ragged here telling me, "Don't trust AI, don't trust AI." So. Then now let's say add custom roles at the organization level. Okay, and now it's going to create a certain role type. I assume there's a couple of ways to define custom roles. Let's see which one it picks. Perfect. Yeah, it created a role type with assignees, and you can assign them permissions for specific permissions for specific users. You see now it added a lot of permissions here, right? And also map them to role assignees or specific static roles. Anyway, so more ideas, things you wanted to do, things that I can add to my demo the next time I do this.
Every relation should rhyme.
Actually have, and I told it to, when you have, let me see the users. I actually not doing it here, interesting. Because I told it to name the users with a role name like Alice admin or Bob editor. So I knew the role they had. And when you check in the did it here, right? But it's not following my advice. This once, I don't know why. I need to check.
How about asking it to document the model with comments?
I think it's maybe okay, perfect. That's good. That's good. I think I need to explain why. Yeah. And the test.
It's funny that it takes longer to update the README than to write all this model code.
Yeah, it needs to update it, and there's just finding the right place is probably taking them time. Also, if you start with your model and tell them like to keep iterating on it, probably will add features that you haven't thought of. Maybe they might be good features, right? So you might get also AI kind of drive your roadmap based on the features it adds to the authorization model. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, anyway, so I find this pretty interesting, and I hope you can find any use of it. If you, yeah, so perfect, adding a condition that worked. And I think that's a good one. Optimize the model for performance. I have mixed feelings about it because today, if you do that, it will become less readable, right? So, and I don't want to make that choice. So what I want is us to be able to optimize the model for performance internally without when you write it and do some pass to make it more optimized. But the end version, the visible version of it should be okay. So it picked the wrong comment syntax. Now we need to add
I knew I
support
could
for
break
Alice.
it. I knew I could break AI.
No. It's it's here, right? So it's realized it's gonna fix it now. And the fun
Wow.
thing with this one is that in this one it realizes it before running the tests, because it sees this in the language engine, right? So it sees that the language doesn't recognize it because it's coded as an error here, and it cannot now fix it. So it interacts, how it's called, the language server, interact with the language server to know if this is correct or not. So we are back in track, Ragged.
Oiled again.
Anyway, so I hope you had fun with this. I had a lot of fun while learning what it does. Sometimes I actually recorded an demo that is in YouTube if you want to look at it and share it. In that moment, it kind of did things that did here, created tuple files or shell script to start OpenFGA. I don't know, it got creative. In general, this is usually the flow it takes when I try it. You can also try with GPT-5, and you get different results, of course, right? And it generates less sophisticated models, but after it finishes something, it asks you, do you want me to add this? Do you want me to add that, right? So it is more conversational from that perspective.
Just to add, whether models you come up through AI or models based on your production, feel free to add them, contributed to our sample stores. So it's meant to be wanted to be have more examples and more these things. So anything you find interesting, please feel free to submit a PR.
Cool. So I'm gonna go back to slides. There's not much in the slides, I think, but let's do that and wrap it up. Okay. So community survey, we are wrapping it up this week. So if you haven't replied to the community survey, please do it now. And so click the link or just scan the QR code and do it. So we get the latest results before processing them and sharing them. So thank you very much for that. Some news. So we're going to be again in KubeCon in November. This time, Jose is going to join someone from Alice from Diagrid. They're going to talk about how to use Dapper and OpenFGA together. The use case there is how you make dual writes consistent in two systems by using the technology that Dapper has for that, specific for that problem. And so it's pretty cool. It's also the CFP for KubeCon Europe is already open. So usually we love to present with customers, with companies that are using OpenFGA. So Andrew, Gerline, Stephen, when you start using the product, and anyone else, if you want to present with us in KubeCon, let us know. Jeremy, if you are ready, that would be awesome too. And in this time, this one is in Europe, but there will be another in the US a year from now, and we can also get ready for that.
Andres,
we also be in. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Even asking if you can post the MCP like configuration, the servers you're using, so for everyone.
Yeah, perfect. I'll do that in the chats, and after I finish this, and then so we also be there in North Carolina for all things open. So Sam is going to be back from paternity leave, and we go directly to Raleigh in the NC. Okay, good. So that's it. Please help us. So we need help on stars and sharing things in social media. And if you join us in the community, follow us in LinkedIn if you can. If you haven't, if you are adopting OpenFGA and you haven't added your company to Adopters MD, please do it. That's super important for us. We are now in the process of being with the evaluation of the CNCF. I haven't mentioned that, but we are now working actively with a team from the CNCF TOC committee to get evaluated FCMs for OpenFGA for incubation. So having more adopters is always useful for us. And now I'm going to share the links I have for the MCP. So this is the link to the MCP. Yeah, we should be in Blue Sky. Ragged, you are my expert on non-traditional like social media channels.
I'm
so let's clear.
So Evan is for Blue Sky. I'm for Mastodon. So
Yeah, I know. Okay, so and then I'll paste the ones I'm using. The one I'm using that is also useful for OpenFGA and for FGA in general is DeepWiki, because DeepWiki has all the documentation for all SDKs for OpenFGA, so, and also for OpenFGA itself, so it can help. And we are going to add the documentation for the SDKs on our own MCP, so you can only add that and have that information. But today that is not there, so you can use the wiki. And there I use the GitHub one because it's useful to. The GitHub MCP is dangerous, so you can use it and say, okay, tell me all the features that we shipped for everything in OpenFGA in the last 6 months, and it will go to the changelog, get the data. It's pretty useful. But at some moments, I got it to create a repository for me, even if I didn't want it, and it's and it can do things on your behalf, right? So you need to be careful. But if you enable it, and I think you have permissions to tell it only do read-only things, don't write anything on my behalf. But apart from that, it's been useful to me. Good. Questions, comment before we wrap up? So yeah, we need to implement authorization for those use cases too. And then we have some companies that are using it for some agentic use cases that have things. Okay, how do I protect the agent for doing something in Slack that they have credentials to do it, but they shouldn't, right? And so that's a very important use case that all the industry try to figure out, and hopefully we can help companies using OpenFGA also for that use case too. Okay, thanks everyone, and let's keep in touch and see each other in a month.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
See you. Bye-bye.